The person who was running around cutting all the phone cords was you, wasn't it, Rika-chan? You shouldn't do that anymore.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Really? She tried to play dumb, but it was written all over her face.
Nipa!
It was obvious she was trying to laugh it off, but that adorable smile of hers just made me want to forgive her. I'm going to be a horrible father, aren't I? That momentary lapse in tension was erased by her next words.
It's good that you found that grandson safe and sound.
Unable to respond right away, I sunk into silence. I had already learned this from Sato-san's info, didn't I? This girl, no, this entire village, knew everything since the moment I set foot in it. I considered playing dumb, but in the end, I chose not to. With everything being known already, there was no point in me feigning ignorance. Somehow.
That's great. Now you can go back to Tokyo.
Thank you.
Are your injuries bad, Akasaka?
Dunno. I haven't heard anything from the doctor yet, so I don't know if they are or not. Huh? Come to think of it, I vaguely remembered being told to lie down and take it easy for at least 24 hours. Did that mean bed rest?
The wounded shouldn't be sneaking out of the hospital.
People shouldn't be cutting phone cords.
Meep. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Then I don't know what you're talking about either. As we played dumb with each other, we both laughed at the same time. If somebody saw us laughing at each other like this, it would probably bring a smile to their lips. The chances of Akasaka leaving this village alive weren't very high.
No, the chances of Akasaka leaving this village alive weren't very high. I don't want Akasaka to die, so I'm glad you're leaving the village alive.
Rika-chan, you knew who I was. Right from the beginning, didn't you? She said nothing, but gave a firm nod. Well then, I think you know this, but we're probably somewhat of an enemy to the people in this village, I would think. But you still gave me lots of warnings. That's right. She said it at that time. She wouldn't warn somebody that she was okay with dying. She definitely said something like that. Then, I should probably be thanking you.
You probably should. I'm your savior.
Saying that, she puffed out her chest proudly. She said it jokingly, but the meaning behind those words was quite heavy. That was because whether I lived or died was a decision that might have been made in a place unbeknownst to me. She said those words with such an adorable smile that it took a few moments of silence for their weight to settle in. I'd been to this place before. The Guardian's office was there. It was the stone steps leading up to the Furude Shrine. When I passed by before, I was so focused on finding a phone booth I hadn't realized where I was. If I recall correctly, this shrine is Rika-chan's house, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Looking up at the shrine grounds, it was brightly lit and energetic voices could be heard. What was going on?
There's a festival today.
A festival?
The best and only festival in Hinamizawa. The Watanagashi Festival.
Watanagashi? Cotton drifting?
Just knowing the name is boring. Do you want to take a look?
She asked bluntly. But, seeing that I looked interested, she climbed up a couple of steps and motioned for me to come. I was only going to go back and sleep anyways. If I had nothing else to do, it might not be a bad idea to go with her on a little detour. In the hostile territory that was this village, I didn't know what would happen if I ventured down a side road without Uishi. Even though I thought of the village like that, when I was with this girl, I forgot all about it. In any case, even without anything to back it up, I felt that as long as I was with her, none of the ill will from the village would befall me. That's why, even though I knew my cover was blown, I strangely had no qualms about setting foot into the heart of the Onigafuchi Guardians' territory. Climbing up to the grounds of the shrine, I could see there were about 3 pavilions set up, with meeting tables and folding chairs. The old folks from the village, no, the executives of the Guardians, were already quite drunkenly sharing another round of drinks. I could only see it as people from the village council drinking while enjoying the evening air. At the very least, it was certainly quite different than any festival I'd ever seen.
See? It's quite a boring festival, isn't it?
This certainly doesn't look like a festival.
It's a festival that's happened since long ago, but as you can see, it's not like it used to be.
As if to chide the old folks, she said that while looking at them with an exasperated expression. You really couldn't call this a festival anymore. It was just a bunch of neighbors getting together to drink under the guise of a festival. I feel sorry for the deity being celebrated here.
Give this sorry excuse for a festival 5 or 6 more years, then everybody in the village will start coming. The ceremony will also be done properly, and it'll be a respectable festival again.
What she said was not so much wishful thinking as it was the telling of a future that had already been determined. She wasn't even predicting it. It was almost like she was simply reporting the results. That's how it sounded. Even though it was a baseless speculation, the way she said it wouldn't let me interject. It was the same way she talked when she changed. While I struggled to find the words to reply to her, she wandered over to the other side of the grounds, not minding me at all. Not in a state where I could afford to be left behind, I hurriedly followed after her. Passing through a copse of pine trees, a strong and cool breeze ruffled my hair. One sec. I gotta... That's a new one. Copse. A small group of trees. Alright, I learned something today. There, from that one evening, was the splendid observation platform the girl had shown me. As it had grown completely dark, the modest lights littered across the landscape, providing a different type of scenery.
Looking at it like this village seems tranquil.
She said that with an indifferent look on her face. Just the other day, you said that this village definitely wouldn't be submerged by the dam, didn't you? She didn't reply, seemingly relishing in the feeling of the wind blowing through her hair. Didn't that mean, at that point in time, the minister had already complied with the demands? She spun around, her gaze meeting mine, but she said nothing. She spoke nothing that would neither confirm nor deny what I had just said. This case will probably remain shrouded in darkness. Headquarters probably doesn't want trouble from a scandal with the minister breaking out.
There's no mistake that they threatened to kill the grandchild.
Then negotiations with the minister were successful, and the grandson was released.
The one who saved the grandson was you.
I wonder about that. The discovery of that wallet that started this chain of events. That alone was almost too convenient, I'd think. Ever since the moment that wallet was discovered, I felt something was odd. Uishi said it as well, that the Sonozaki family had given the order to release the hostage, meaning that our little manhunt was a farce to begin with. Come to think of it, I was punched, kicked, and had a gun pointed at me. I felt like they put up quite a fight, but that might have been all part of a good performance. Once the negotiations were successful, they couldn't just say, "Here you go," and return the minister's grandson right to his doorstep. They knew the public safety had realized that this was a kidnapping case and were moving in on it. That's why, due to the actions of public safety, the grandson was able to be rescued safely. So the minister didn't give in to any unreasonable demands. That type of performance was necessary.
I don't know about these difficult things.
Likewise. Even for me, I can't make much sense of it. But there's one thing I can be certain of.
Hmm?
It's just as you said. This village won't be submerged. The dam project will soon be over. That wasn't something an officer of the law should be saying, but I naturally let those words slip from my mouth. This village may have stirred up all sorts of trouble, but that was because they were protecting their homes. If someone just decided by themselves that I had to leave the house I was used to living in, I would resent them as well. On top of that, it wasn't a place like mine where I just happened to be renting it, but a place that their families had lived for generations. It might be ignorant to call their desperate resistance an overreaction. I might not really be qualified to criticize politics or bureaucracy, but deliberately building a dam on land that was loved by its residents wasn't something I could get behind. Still, aren't you glad?
Why would that be?
At the very least, with this, peace will return to this village. Even though the minister promised to use his considerable influence to cancel the project, it would probably take more than a few months before it would be completely scrapped. At the very least, it would probably take 1 or 2 years. For the villagers to officially hear that their village wasn't going to be submerged at the bottom of a dam was still a ways away. But it was no mistake that the promise of peace returning to the village was there. It turned out, from beginning to end, that it had already been decided. Just as the girl had said, it was decided. There wasn't really a need for me to come here in the first place. There was absolutely no need for me to have to come here and aggravate an unpleasant situation. If I had never come here, then the grandson's release might have been done in a more amicable manner.
Peace. In this village.
When I nodded, she laughed as if to admonish me, but her face remained indifferent, expressionless. And then her eyes narrowed slightly as she snickered.
Even though every year from now on, something bloody will occur.
Rika-chan, what are you talking about? As the wind blew her hair about, the girl, as if taking pleasure in that I was the only one who didn't know, continued to snicker as she looked at my face for a while.
You see, in a few years, I'll be killed.
Huh? Backlit by the moon, it was hard to tell if her expression that had been cast in shadow was smiling, amused, or resigned. You will? Why?
It's a very unpleasant thing, though. It's also probably been decided already.
Decided already? Who would decide that sort of thing?
I'd like to know that as well.
Turning back to face me, she showed me a resolute expression for the first time, and after staring into my eyes for a moment, she turned back to gaze at the scenery before she spoke her next words.
There's a lot of people who have no regard for human life. Even if I tell you this, it might not change anything, though. But if you want to erase the specter of death, sometimes, like with the reflection of the moon on the water, all you have to do is throw a small stone.
I had no idea what she was trying to say. It's just, I had to listen to every word with my body and soul. Or at least, that's what I thought.
This day next year. Yes, June 1979, on this day, the foreman of the dam construction project will be killed.
What? For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what she was talking about. By the foreman, did she mean that gruff old man I played mahjong with? Oh my god. Be killed? What makes you think? She didn't answer, but she had the same expression on her face as she did when she declared that the dam project would go away. That wasn't the face of somebody making a forecast or a prediction. It was something that was already decided. No, it was as if she was already reporting the results. That sort of expression.
After being killed in a gruesome manner, the body will be torn apart and disposed of.
Murdered and dismembered.
The next year, in June of 1980 on this day, Sadako's parents will be pushed to their deaths.
Sadako? It was the first time I heard that name, but I didn't have the courage to interrupt the girl's story.
It might be an accident. An unfortunate accident.
The girl smiled faintly, but she wasn't exactly encouraging me to smile along with the lifeless look in her eyes.
And then, the year after that, this day in June of 1981, my parents will be killed. And then the year after that, this day in June of 1982, Sadako's abusive aunt will have her head split open and die. And then the year after that, this day in the June of 1983, or possibly a few days afterwards, I will be killed. If all the deaths are preordained, then the last one would also be all according to plan. But then whose plan would it be?
Well, this is getting spooky. This village is full of murderers and people who have no regard for human life. It would be fine to believe that all the deaths up to 1982 would be the work of somebody in the village. It would be fine to believe that all the deaths that would occur were at the discretion of those who control the village. But that didn't explain what would happen in 1983. There was no way that the last death would fit in with anybody's plans. They had no regard for human life. They would use every means at their disposal to meet their goals. But their goals were at odds with the last death. That's why the last death was unrelated to them. But that last death would definitely, most likely, probably, without question, happen. Probably, definitely, I dare say. The last death would be a merciful one. A handkerchief of something being placed over their mouth, making them lose consciousness, never to wake up again. Exactly whose plan was that?
I want to live happily. That's my only wish. Surrounded by my precious friends, spending our days enjoyably. Only that. I don't wish for anything more than that.
Rika-chan.
I don't want to die.
The girl, stoic as ever, let those last words slip in the end. Eventually, we were discovered by some drunks. The girl, as well as I, were dragged back to the festivities. Everybody was completely drunk, so even when they saw my head completely wrapped in bandages, they wouldn't let me leave. Well, certainly, if I was in good enough condition to slip out of the hospital, it must not be that serious. The girl was mingling with everybody, being pampered like a kitten. Her expression was adorable, nothing like the one from just before, predicting her own death and whispering that she didn't want to die. Having said that, having a silly and lively conversation like this, it was hard to believe that these people were the core of an extremist resistance group. Even if it was a shell of its former self, it was a festival where people in the village gathered, so the 20-some odd folk here should have included some of the village executives and other important members. Among those, there was no doubt that there were members that were at the Sonozaki Family Council in attendance. Meaning, even if we never met face to face before, there were people here who knew my identity. In a small village like this, they knew the faces of all the villagers that lived there. That's why, without even saying anything, it soon became obvious that I was an outsider. But they actually seemed interested by that, asking me all sorts of questions about Tokyo, drinking while musing on their faint relationship the city had with the villagers, and empathizing with the rather meager environment. The confidential talks with the minister were finished. His grandson was in police custody, everything was over. I might not have to be put in another perilous situation. To me, they were only my adversaries because of my job. Outside of that, there was no reason I couldn't be friendly with them. The next time I visited this village, would it return to being a tranquil and beautiful place? If that happened, I might be able to take a relaxed walk around the village with her again. My cup was once again filled to the brim with beer. By the time I was able to get away, it was the middle of the night. The girl had at some point disappeared. It seems that her parents had told her to go home and sleep when she let out a large yawn. The old folks, who had absolutely no remorse for making an injured person hang out with them, told me as much as they laughed. I was just there drinking, so I had thought to help a bit with cleanup. However, my help was refused on the grounds that I was a guest. On top of that, they had a car prepared to take me back to the hospital. Losing the battle against my sleepiness inside the car, I was sound asleep until we reached the parking lot of the hospital. The front door of the hospital was naturally locked at this hour. I wandered around bewilderedly, searching for a back entrance, until somebody on night duty found out and let me inside. "Where were you this late at night? Dr. Irie was worried, you know." "Sorry for the trouble. I was held up by the people having a festival at the shrine." "Oh, they did say something about everybody in the town council getting together for a drink. My condolences. Are your wounds all right?" "They're throbbing a bit. It's probably because of the alcohol, I think." "Oh, that's right. The detective that was with you wanted to get in touch." "Oops. I kept Uishi-san waiting." I glanced at the clock. No matter how you looked at it, it was way too late to call him now. I'll apologize to him tomorrow over the phone. I returned back to my hospital room and slipped into the bed that was still unmade from the time I went outside. Oh, that's no good. I have to turn off the lights. But my weariness had cut the cord powering my body, lulling me into a deep sleep. "Oh yeah? Alright." Oh, and that was the chapter. That was a short one. I didn't need to end that at all. It was gonna end perfectly. It was gonna end at the exact perfect moment yesterday. I cut off yesterday for no reason. Absolutely no reason. There was something I didn't like about my child. I first realized it when I started writing these things down. They never warn you about it in any books about raising children, but they aren't just a plaything. If they aren't able to feel loved, even when they're not doing exactly as their parents want them to, then those parents are failures. This wasn't something like that, though. How can I say it? It's probably harder to express with mere words. I just want my child to be average. As long as they weren't falling behind, there wasn't any need for them to excel at something. As long as they acted appropriately for their age, I would have been fine with it. But my child had been different ever since kindergarten. While the children in her class were running around in excitement about the field trip the next day, she only wore a bored look on her face, aloof and distant. When the other kids broke the equipment for the athletics festival and were apologizing fervently, she only wore a bored look on her face, aloof and distant. When the teacher was reading a fun picture book, only she wasn't smiling. Even if they all got to eat a delicious bento, only she wasn't happy. If it was only this, it would still be in the realm of understanding. However, what I don't understand about my child is that if the aforementioned situations happened again, they'd now act in a manner befitting their age. I don't understand the principle behind that as a parent. Why were they indifferent about the field trip, but happy about this one? Why were they indifferent about that picture book, but happy about this one? Why were they indifferent about the bento, but happy about this one? The former and the latter in each situation seem exactly the same to me. There was even times when I thought the former one was better. I don't understand that child's feelings. During parent-teacher meetings, the teacher always says the same thing, and I would always respond that I don't understand my own child, and we would mope together. My husband, always the optimist, once said that a young child's feelings are different from an adult's, so if there were some things we didn't understand, we shouldn't worry about it. I lament his lack of urgency. One day, when I was in a good mood, I took the effort to prepare a menu that my child would enjoy, but she only smiled with a vague expression of disinterest. That attitude frankly made me angry, so I hit her on the head. On a day when the weather was nice, the laundry I had just hung up to dry was blown by a large gust of wind, causing the entire line to fall down. But she, watching me trying to pick up the laundry in a panic, stood there laughing. That attitude, frankly, made me angry, so I hit her on the head. I think the same sort of thing happened countless times. Before I knew it, my child was only able to look at me with an indifferent expression on her face. I regret the fact that I've been a bad mother. Thinking I should regain her trust, I thought to get it back little by little with some light interactions. Seeing her do some sort of craft work on the veranda, I called out to her. "These past few days have been nice and sunny. The air feels nice, doesn't it?" That child, with that indifferent look on her face I hated so much, looked up at me for a moment. Then, without a word, returned to immersing herself in her craft work. Up until now, I would have hit her on the head just for that. I held myself back. "What are you making? Is it a doll?" "A weather charm." That child was using inserts from the newspaper to deftly make some weather charms. The forecast hadn't called for rain, but that child, in her own way, was praying that these sunny days would continue. Being able to understand my own child for the first time in a while, I couldn't hide my own happiness. Bringing out a ball of yarn, I began to hang my child's cute weather charms from the eaves of the house. It's no good, Rika. The heads are too heavy, see? They've become reverse weather charms now. If they're like this, they'll call the rain instead of the sun. When I started to take them down, my child tugged at the hem of my shirt as if to stop me. "That's because I made them to be upside down. They're fine." "But Rika, if they're upside down, they won't be a charm that calls for a sunny day, you know?" "I was making a charm for it to rain, so they're fine." I desperately suppressed my emotions welling up inside of me. I was trying desperately to understand my child. "Oh, I see. The morning glories in the garden were starting to get a little wilted from all the sun, so you wanted some rain, right?" That child turned to me with the expression that I hated the most. "I got bored of the clear weather." I don't understand. I don't understand. I just can't understand that child. Ooh. Well, it sounds like Rika's mom had a few issues of her own. During the family council, she buried herself under Oryu-san's futon again. Oryu-san dotes on her unwaveringly. No matter whatever insolence my child commits, she doesn't mind. It's almost as though my child is a kitten or something. Oryu dotes on her exactly like you would with a kitten. As her mother, I chided her for doing that. Until Oryu-san had said 3 times that it was fine, I chided her as a formality. Of course, she never lends an ear to any of my chidings. Knowing that Oryu-san's standing was far above mine, she behaves like that. I don't like the cunning that's unbefitting of her age, either. In any case, not only Oryu-san, but the rest of the old folk in the village spoil her too much. One day I was surprised. By chance, on the way back from some shopping, I saw her by herself just outside a candy shop. My own child suddenly grabbed a snack, opened the package right there, and then started eating it. She didn't make any attempt to pay for it, and she didn't even think of looking around. It didn't even feel like she was shoplifting, more like she was brazenly eating snacks that was offered to her. When I began to admonish my child, the elderly shop owner appeared and covered for her. The owner gave the ridiculous excuse that he had said it was okay for that child to eat any of the snacks out by the entrance, so it was fine. When I tried to pay for the snacks that my child had eaten, the owner refused my money. During that exchange, more old folks had suddenly gathered around, and it began to feel like I was the one in the wrong. The elderly people all put their hands together reverently in front of my child and repeatedly voiced their respects. I was born into the Furude family, so it wasn't like I didn't know why she was being treated specially. When I was still young, it was something I heard often from my grandmother. If by chance the child that I gave birth to was a girl, that child would be the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. All the older folk believe she's the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama and spoil her rotten. And not only did they spoil her, but they even told her she was the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama, that she had a divine power, and threw all sorts of strange folk tales her way. So she may have begun to believe herself that she was a special existence. I went around and told everybody that it wasn't good for her upbringing, so to stop telling her all these strange things. But there was no uprooting the elderly people's deep-seated superstitions. I told my child not to listen to them, but it ended up being that she stopped listening to me. Between all the old folks in the village who would dote on her, and myself who only scolded her, there was no wonder who she would listen to. There was no mistaking that the reason she had become strange was because of the elderly villagers. There was no doubt that they had shoved her full of strange folk tales and superstitions since she was young. If it wasn't for that, there was no doubt my child would have been cute and normal. Oh, somebody's upset. One sunny parent-teacher day, there was a cooking class, and my child was making curry rice with a practiced hand. While the other children her age were awkwardly using their kitchen knives, that child was wielding hers deftly. The teacher approached me with a smile on their face, saying it must be a result of learning it at home. I managed to play it off with a vague smile and nod in response. That was because I had never once taught my child how to make curry rice. Even then, she was peeling vegetables with a practiced hand, adding them into the pot in the order of which took longer to cook. For a normal parent, they might unintentionally clap their hands together, happy at their child's actions. But in my case, it was different. There was no mistaking that somebody had taught her how to make that curry rice when I wasn't taking care of her. Thinking that, I quietly fell into an unpleasant mood. When I asked, it seemed she could also sew and do the laundry. I had never taught her how to do those, and again, never saw her do it around the house, be it cooking or sewing or the laundry. Again, that was probably because the elderly villagers taught her all sorts of rubbish when I wasn't looking. And not only that, they probably taught her all sorts of strange superstitions, trying to prop her up as the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. I said as much to my husband, suggesting that they should keep our child away from the elderly folk. But my husband, who was in the position of being the head priest of the Furude shrine, had little power against the elderly who supported it. He took the rather uncommitted stance of saying that as long as she was being doted upon, wasn't it fine? I argued against that she was our child and should be a completely normal girl. That what the elderly were expecting, that she was the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama, was simply odd. The elderly villagers believed that child has divine powers. We would discuss the weather for the following day, but there were many times when I left the house without an umbrella and came back soaking wet. Rather than having clairvoyance that was just secondhand knowledge from her watching the news all the time. The things that she knew that she shouldn't have known were just a result of the people who were trying to indoctrinate her and the people who were gossiping getting together in the village. However, there certainly were days when everybody thought it was going to be sunny all day, and that child would stubbornly not go out without an umbrella. It would occasionally rain, and in the end, we would be saved. There might also have been times where Rika knew of major accidents in foreign countries faster than the news did. I thought that she must have heard it break over the radio or something. Knowing things she shouldn't have, something like that, was in front of me right now, wasn't it? That child was making curry rice when there shouldn't have been anybody who taught her how to. No, that couldn't possibly be the case. Somebody had taught her, indoctrinated her. When I wasn't taking care of her, somebody had indoctrinated Rika with something. Furude-san's curry is absolutely splendid. I'll give it a gold star.
Nipa!
Where did you learn to cook, Furude-san? At home?
Yes, at home.
The other parents in attendance were impressed. Lies. All lies. I didn't teach her anything. Who was it? Who was it? Who was the person who had completely indoctrinated my child? She was my normal, average daughter, not the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. Oh. Hey, that's all the tips. That means this is the last chapter.